Why so many men are done with women. Psychology tips. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. Eden Abes. You know what's happening quietly all around us right now? A lot of men are still in the relationship, but emotionally, they've already packed their bags. Not because they hate women, not because they're cold, but because they're exhausted in a way they don't even know how to explain anymore. They're sitting there getting hit with an argument that's not about today. It's about a tone from years ago, a mistake that was forgiven but never really released, a moment they can't fix because it's already in the past, yet they're still being punished in the present. And the strangest part is that these men aren't even fighting back. They're just trying to survive the conversation. They start apologizing just to end the storm, nodding just to keep peace, swallowing their feelings because the second they share them, it turns into a courtroom. So now you're the victim. Here we go again. You always make it about you. Over time, something breaks inside them, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. They stop sharing, stop explaining, stop hoping they'll be understood. Because deep down they've learned a painful rule: no matter what they say, it will be used against them. And then one day, after enough nights of feeling like the enemy in their own home, they don't yell, they don't beg, they don't threaten. They just go cold. They say two words that shock everyone: I'm done. Suddenly, the world acts confused. Where are the good men? Why are men avoiding commitment? Why won't men try anymore? But many of them did try for years. They just got tired of being the only one who had to stay calm, stay strong, stay wrong. They feel like the rules don't reward honesty, only surrender. So they don't leave in a dramatic way. They check out. And once a man checks out emotionally, the relationship is already bleeding out, even if he's still sitting right there on the couch. Here's the key point most people miss: men don't walk away because of one argument. They walk away because they feel consistently disrespected, consistently unheard, and constantly blamed, until love starts feeling like a job they're failing every day. So let me ask you something that reveals everything fast. If a man could speak his feelings with total honesty, without being mocked, punished, or turned into the villain, would he still be done? Because the truth is, a lot of men don't stop loving. They stop believing love is safe. Next time you're in an argument with a woman, try to identify what you're actually arguing about. Really try. I guarantee you can't, because it started about the dishes, moved to her mother, jumped to that incident in 2020, circled back to your tone, and somehow ended with you apologizing for her feelings. Read that again. Slowly. That experience feels familiar to many men because it follows a pattern. A very specific one. What looks like chaos on the surface often has an internal logic underneath. Not random. Not accidental. This isn't accidental. This isn't just how women are. This is a strategy. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The key mistake most men make is assuming every emotional display is spontaneous and pure. You're told to believe that emotion equals truth. That tears equal sincerity. That anger equals injury. But that assumption quietly puts you at a disadvantage. Female emotionality as a strategic behavior is something most men never recognize. You think she's just upset, just emotional, just needs to vent. But watch the timing. The tears come exactly when you're making a valid point. Not before, not after, right then. The anger erupts precisely when you ask for accountability. And notice what happens next. The confusion happens right when you need a straight answer. That's not chaos. That's pressure. Don't rush to calm her down. Don't abandon your point. Don't confuse empathy with surrender. Because the moment you shift from discussing the issue to managing her emotions, the conversation has already changed. Quietly. Completely. Instead of resolving the issue, you start managing her emotional reaction to the issue. That is the pivot. That is the moment the original topic disappears. The dishes are gone. The facts are gone. The timeline is gone. In their place is an emotional storm you're expected to fix, without tools, without rules, and without resolution. The real topic of the dispute is immediately buried under an avalanche of her feelings. Understand this clearly. Clarity creates responsibility. Clarity demands answers. She doesn't want clarity. Clarity means accountability. Confusion, on the other hand, keeps things fluid, slippery, unresolved. She wants confusion because confusion means control. So the conversation expands. She'll bring up 17 different issues, mix past with present, blend feelings with facts, until you're so disoriented you don't even remember what started the conversation. That is why so many men feel exhausted rather than resolved, drained rather than heard. You're not losing arguments. You're losing focus. Be grounded. Be slow. Be precise. You must hold the line on the original issue, not aggressively, calmly, clearly, repeatedly. Don't attack emotion. Name the topic. Return to it. That is not cold. That is not uncaring. That is leadership and communication. Once you see the pattern, you stop blaming yourself for conversations that never seem to land anywhere. You stop apologizing for feelings you didn't cause. And you start understanding why so many men quietly step back, shut down, or walk away, not because they don't care, but because clarity was never allowed to exist. And that realization changes everything. You think you're playing chess, making rational moves, planning ahead, staying fair. But she's often playing something else entirely, a quiet psychological contest shaped by beliefs most men were never taught to see. That's why so many men feel exhausted, confused, and eventually step back. The real rules of modern relationships are rarely spoken out loud, yet they quietly dictate who adapts, who apologizes, and who carries the emotional weight. As Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If you don't see the hidden stories running the game, you keep blaming yourself for outcomes that were never fully in your control. This is the core lesson behind why so many men are done with women. It's not anger, not bitterness. It's awareness. In modern life, where dating apps, social pressure, and constant comparison amplify tension, clarity becomes power. The smartest move is boundaries, calm strength, self-respect, not endless explaining. Respect grows from consistency, not persuasion. As Warren Buffett said, the most important investment you can make is in yourself. So invest in emotional discipline. Invest in your mission. Protect your energy. Build a life so solid that relationships become a choice, not a battlefield. Because why so many men are done with women is really about men choosing mastery over chaos, direction over confusion, and when you do that, you don't lose. You lead. You stabilize. You win. The first myth that quietly drains many men is the mind-reading expectation, and when you slow down and really look at it, it makes no sense at all, yet it's treated like a natural law of love. You're expected to know what she wants without being told, to anticipate feelings before they're expressed, to act on needs that were never named, and when you miss the mark, the conclusion is never confusion, it's carelessness. That is the trick. Don't miss it. The assumption is not we failed to communicate, but you failed to notice, and suddenly attention becomes proof of love instead of communication becoming the bridge. Be clear about this. When expectations stay unspoken, disappointment is guaranteed, not because anyone is unkind, but because guessing is not connection. You must understand how this creates constant pressure, a low-grade tension that never leaves, because you know sooner or later you'll fall short again. It becomes a quiet test you didn't agree to take, with rules that change and standards that stay hidden. That is not intimacy. That is anxiety dressed up as romance. Think about it in practical terms. If you showed up at work and your manager expected you to complete tasks without ever explaining them, then judged your commitment based on your failure, you'd call that unreasonable without hesitation. Yet in relationships, the same setup gets excused with phrases like, if you cared, you'd know. No. If you cared, you'd speak. If you valued the relationship, you'd explain. That is not cold logic. That is basic respect. Don't accept the idea that clarity ruins romance. It strengthens it. Be direct. Be honest. Be willing to say what you need and expect the same in return. These are not complaints. These are psychology tips rooted in emotional maturity. Men don't walk away because they fear closeness. Many walk away because they're tired of being evaluated on invisible criteria. That is why so many men grow weary, not of love, but of confusion. Real love advice isn't about guessing better. It's about building a space where guessing isn't required. Remember this psychology tips truth: understanding grows from words, not silence. And this love advice matters. Communication is not a weakness, it's the only way connection survives. The second myth, emotional supremacy, is even more destructive, and this is where many men quietly give up. Not because they don't care, but because the rules keep changing right in front of them. In this myth, her feelings aren't just valid, they're treated as facts. She feels disrespected, therefore, you disrespected her. It doesn't matter what you meant. Intent is erased. She feels unloved, therefore, you don't love her. That is the switch. Emotion stops being a signal and starts acting like a verdict. Her emotions become reality, and reality becomes negotiable. Your side of the story is muted. Your intentions are dismissed. Objective facts become irrelevant. The weight of her experience instantly overrides any logic you can offer, not because logic is wrong, but because it's no longer welcome. You're no longer discussing what actually happened. You're discussing how she felt about what she believes happened. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Notice the trap. The burden shifts to you. A man must now prove his innocence against a feeling. Ask yourself this simple question: how do you disprove a feeling? You can't. That's the point. It's an unfalsifiable accusation disguised as intuition. No evidence required. No resolution possible. Don't argue harder. Don't over-explain. That only deepens the hole. Be aware of the pattern. Be calm. Be grounded in your own reality. That is real psychology tips, not internet noise dressed up as wisdom. This is why so many men feel exhausted in modern relationships. They're not running from responsibility. They're running from conversations where truth has no stable ground. Good love advice starts with mutual reality, not emotional hierarchy and not permanent guilt. You must recognize the difference between empathy and self-erasure. Care, yes. Surrender your reality, no. These psychology tips matter because without them, connection slowly turns into confusion, and confusion, over time, turns into quiet withdrawal. That's not bitterness. That's self-preservation. And honest love advice begins right there. Here's the truth many men eventually discover, and it's the third myth that breaks their patience. The double standard in emotional expression is not accidental. It's built into modern relationships, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. When a woman explodes emotionally, raises her voice, slams doors, or lashes out verbally, society rushes in with explanations, excuses, and sympathy, calling it expression or stress. But when a man shows frustration even once, he's instantly labeled as the problem, the risk, the one who crossed the line. That imbalance teaches men a brutal lesson. Your feelings are not allowed, only tolerated when silent. Marcus Aurelius warned us, you have power over your mind, not outside events, and this is where psychology tips become essential, because men must learn to regulate internally rather than seek permission externally. I've seen cases where a man was punished simply for speaking loudly while chaos flew at him unchecked, and that wasn't a rare failure. It was a predictable outcome of a system that treats male emotion as evidence instead of experience. Mark Twain said, "Truth is stranger than fiction," and this truth is playing out daily in modern life, in homes, courts, and relationships. That's why love advice today must be grounded in reality, not fantasy. The winning strategy is clarity, emotional discipline, and boundaries. Not arguments. Not pleading. Not reactions. You don't need validation to be steady. You don't need approval to be calm. You don't need permission to step back and protect your peace. These psychology tips matter because mastery begins with restraint, and real love advice starts with self-respect. Control your responses. Document your reality. Choose silence over escalation. Remember this: strength is quiet, victory is internal, and the man who governs himself cannot be controlled by a broken standard. The cultural story many men absorb today is subtle, steady, and exhausting, and you feel it long before you can name it because it shows up everywhere you look: films, television, headlines, comment sections. quietly teaching the same lesson again and again. Women's emotions are treated as sacred signals that must be honored immediately, while men's emotions are framed as problems to be fixed, hidden, or dismissed, and that contrast sinks in over time until it shapes how you speak, how you react, and how carefully you edit yourself in your own home. Don't ignore this pattern. Notice it. When a woman expresses sadness, frustration, or anger, the world rushes in with reassurance and validation. When a man does the same, he's often told to toughen up, stay silent, or stop making it uncomfortable. Social media doesn't just reflect this imbalance, it magnifies it, creating a nonstop echo chamber where compassion flows freely in one direction while restraint is demanded in the other. The lesson becomes painfully clear. Your feelings matter only when they are useful to someone else. Otherwise, you're expected to carry on, provide, and stay quiet. Be honest about the impact of that message, because inside relationships, it creates the no-win situation that drains men slowly but deeply. Question her emotions, and you're called dismissive. Validate them, and you're seen as admitting fault. Try to add nuance, and you're accused of playing games. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a system where the rules shift depending on what you say. Stop blaming yourself for losing a game that was never built for fairness. Understand what that does to your mind. It forces constant self-censorship, turning everyday conversations into emotional obstacle courses where you weigh every word, anticipate every reaction, and walk carefully just to keep the peace. That isn't connection. That is survival mode. Instead of feeling like an equal partner, you become responsible for managing another adult's emotional weather while denying your own. Over years, this role creates a quiet psychological fatigue that stacks up day after day until you feel hollow, irritable, or detached without knowing why. That is why psychology tips matter here. Not to attack anyone, but to clarify what's actually happening beneath the surface. Clarity brings relief. Once you start seeing these repeating patterns, something shifts inside you. You realize that emotions are experiences, not unquestionable facts. That understanding alone gives you room to breathe. Don't confuse this with being cold or unkind. It's the opposite. It's about grounding yourself in reality instead of surrendering it. When you stop automatically treating someone else's feelings as the final authority, you begin to establish calm, steady boundaries. Those boundaries reveal the truth of the dynamic in front of you. Either the relationship adapts and grows healthier, or it shows you that control matters more than connection. Either outcome moves you forward. Be clear with yourself. This awakening isn't about resentment. It's about self-respect. Many men are reaching it after watching the costs up close, seeing friends financially and emotionally drained by endless conflict, witnessing families fracture, noticing how easily a man's inner life is dismissed when it becomes inconvenient. They're finally doing the math. They're deciding that silence is too expensive. That is why love advice today must include emotional literacy for men. Not shame, not pressure, honest language. Language that says you're allowed to feel, allowed to question, allowed to step back from dynamics that leave you depleted, allowed to choose peace over constant justification. Use psychology tips to observe, not to accuse. To understand patterns instead of internalizing blame. Remember this as you move forward. You don't need to win arguments to reclaim your life. You need to stop playing roles that erase you. Speak with calm conviction. Act with intention. Refuse narratives that tell you your inner world doesn't count. Because when you do that consistently, you don't lose love. You create the conditions for real love to finally exist. And that is the kind of love advice that sets men free. Here's the hard question men are finally brave enough to ask. What exactly is the upside to this arrangement? What are men truly getting that justifies this level of risk? When you strip away the romance marketing and remove the fairy tales, the modern relationship offer to men becomes painfully clear. It looks less like an invitation and more like a warning label. Provide everything. Expect nothing. Pay for everything. Own nothing. Sacrifice everything. Be guaranteed nothing. That is not love. That is liability. Men are told they must be responsible for her happiness while expecting no reciprocity in return. They are expected to manage her emotions but bury their own. Be understanding. Be patient. Be accommodating. And if she is unhappy for any reason at all, the consequences can be severe, losing half of what they've built and sometimes even limited access to their children. Don't call that balance. Don't call that partnership. Call it what it is, a one-sided gamble. Young men, especially, are looking at this deal with clear eyes and quietly saying no thanks. And here's what society often refuses to admit: they are not opting out because they can't attract women. They're opting out because they can do math. They've analyzed the cost-benefit ratio and found it deeply unconvincing. That's why many choose video games, hobbies, friendships, careers, fitness, travel, anything but relationships. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Any honest discussion of psychology tips and modern love advice must start with that truth. The statistics are impossible to ignore. Marriage rates are at historic lows. Birth rates continue to fall. And instead of asking the obvious question, what's wrong with the relationship deal being offered to men, society turns the spotlight elsewhere and asks, what's wrong with men? That lack of self-awareness is breathtaking. What's really happening beneath the surface is simple but profound. Men are discovering they don't actually need what's being offered. For decades, they were told relationships were the missing piece. That happiness came from completion. That validation came from being chosen. So they tried. And many found not fulfillment, but exhaustion. Not growth, but depletion. Not appreciation, but constant criticism. Then something unexpected happened. They tried life without relationships. And they discovered something shocking. It's actually pretty good. The old social myth that a man is only complete as part of a couple is collapsing before our eyes. Men are rediscovering self-sufficiency that years of conditioning tried to take from them. They're learning a truth psychology rarely states clearly: an internal void cannot be filled by another person. It can only be filled by purpose, competence, and self-respect. A friend once shared something that captures this shift perfectly. I spent 10 years trying to make her happy and was miserable. I've spent 2 years making myself happy, and I feel fantastic. That one sentence explains more than volumes of theory ever could. He has money now because no one else is spending it. Peace because no one is creating constant tension. Time because no one is demanding attention. Energy because no one is draining it. He isn't anti-woman. He's pro-self. And that distinction matters more than ever. Instead of pouring resources into the bottomless pit of someone else's expectations, he's investing in himself, his skills, his health, his financial stability, his emotional regulation. His internal bank, both emotional and financial, has finally started to grow. And here's the uncomfortable truth: this kind of self-investment pays dividends no unhealthy relationship ever could. That's a core insight modern psychology tips often hint at but rarely say out loud, and it's essential love advice for men navigating today's landscape. The freedom men discover when they walk away can feel intoxicating. No more arguments about nothing. No more apologizing for existing. No more walking on emotional landmines. No more managing someone else's feelings while ignoring your own. Just peace, growth, direction, and real happiness. This isn't a rejection of love. It's a rejection of bad deals. And if we're serious about understanding men today, we must stop shaming them for opting out and start questioning why the offer no longer makes sense. Be honest. Be rational. Be fair. Men are not broken. They are adapting. They are choosing stability over chaos, purpose over performance, self-respect over silent resentment. And until relationships offer mutual benefit instead of silent sacrifice, more men will continue to walk away, not in anger, but in calm certainty. That isn't a crisis. That's a way-up call. The hard truth many men between 35 and 70 quietly arrive at, not in anger, not in drama, but in silence and clarity. They don't storm out. They shut down. Because exhaustion teaches faster than pain ever could. What you're witnessing today isn't rage. It's resignation. The calm decision of a man who has finally done the math and refuses to keep paying for a deal that drains his time, his money, his peace, and his future. The opposite of love was never hate. It was always indifference. When a man stops arguing, stops explaining, stops trying to be understood, that's not bitterness. That's awareness. That's a man realizing the system he's in does not reward effort, honesty, or loyalty. It penalizes them. And once logic wakes up, emotions lose control. Men are builders by nature. Builders walk away from structures that are collapsing, no matter how much sentiment is attached to them. As Warren Buffett said, the most important thing to do if you find yourself in a hole is to stop digging. That's exactly what's happening. Men are stepping back, not because they hate women, because they value themselves. When men try to explain this shift, they're met with dismissal, shaming, and labels designed to silence discussion rather than address reality. Those tactics no longer work. Once a man understands that constant criticism is not connection, that walking on eggshells is not intimacy, and that funding someone else's lifestyle while receiving stress in return is not partnership, guilt loses its power. Modern life has made the exchange painfully clear. Relationships are being evaluated like investments. Men are applying basic economics to emotional decisions. Psychology tips tell us repeated negative outcomes condition withdrawal, not engagement. When commitment offers risk without reward, obligation without appreciation, and responsibility without authority, men opt out. Calmly, decisively, without apology. Marcus Aurelius warned us long ago, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Strength today looks like choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over endless compromise. The dating landscape exposes this shift in real time. Confusion about where reliable men went, with little reflection on why they left. Standards rose. Contribution shrank. Men noticed. When intimacy is removed, what remains is often replaceable. Friendship, support, structure, purpose, all available without emotional toll. The traditional promise of family, legacy, and shared mission has faded, while expectations remain firmly in place. Men aren't angry. They simply refuse to pretend the deal hasn't changed. This is where love advice must become honest. The biggest myth men are breaking is that a relationship is required for wholeness. That solitude equals loneliness. That approval determines worth. That sacrifice without balance equals love. These beliefs kept men trapped. Breaking them brings freedom. Men who step away describe it as waking up. Fog lifts. Tolerance turns into disbelief. Once awareness arrives, there is no return. Emotional independence feels too powerful to surrender. Personal growth accelerates when you stop managing someone else's emotions. Energy returns. Finances stabilize. Focus sharpens. Time expands. Life feels like it belongs to you again. One man left a long-term marriage, rebuilt his health, created a business, traveled freely, and said he didn't realize how small his life had become trying to fit into someone else's expectations. This isn't anti-relationship thinking. It's pro-growth thinking. Men don't want drama. They want direction. They don't want validation. They want results. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Many modern arrangements remove the why and demand endless how. Men refuse that imbalance. Psychology tips remind us emotional dependency is not love. It's reliance. Reliance without reciprocity erodes self-respect. True strength begins when a man understands his value is internal. Happiness doesn't require permission. Peace is not selfish. It is earned. The advice is firm. Build your life first. Protect your peace. Choose growth over guilt. Let logic guide where emotion once ruled. If a relationship adds to your mission, clarity, and strength, it earns its place. If it subtracts, you step back without resentment. A 9 when men quietly check out, the reaction from women is often revealing. Not thoughtful, not curious, just heated. Because instead of asking what went wrong with the offer, there is anger that men are no longer agreeing to deals that drain them. Frustration that familiar pressure no longer lands. Disbelief that guilt and emotional leverage have stopped working. That reaction alone explains more than most debates ever could. Rage and shame only hold power over men who still seek approval. And a growing number simply don't. Not because they are bitter, not because they are closed off, but because they finally learn something crucial through lived experience and real psychology tips. Meaning comes from purpose, not constant negotiation for affection. Value comes from growth, not applause. And when a man's identity stops being tied to relationship status and becomes anchored to mission, the leverage disappears because the hunger for validation disappears with it. This is where the real shift begins. Men who are done are not anti-connection or anti-love. They're anti-chaos, anti-imbalance, anti-agreements that demand everything while offering very little back. And here's what many miss. These men are not gone forever. They are simply unavailable to bad deals. Change the offer and you change the outcome. Offer partnership instead of obligation. Bring peace instead of emotional turbulence. Add value instead of constant cost. Men respond to incentives the same way markets do. Rationally, calmly, clearly. Until those incentives change, the exit will continue. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. This is not emotional rebellion. This is adaptation. The personal solution is not complicated, even if it is uncomfortable. Protect yourself. Recognize emotional manipulation. Reject frameworks where effort is one-sided. Demand reciprocity. Or walk away without apology. Your happiness matters. Your peace matters. Your life matters. You are not required to accept terms that slowly hollow you out just to prove loyalty. Understanding this is not hatred. It is radical self-care. It is setting a standard that becomes the filter through which every future interaction is measured. Walking away is not failure. Refusing a bad relationship is not fear. Choosing peace is not selfishness. Protecting your energy is not a flaw. It is wisdom. If the system feels broken, you are not wrong for declining to participate in your own erosion. The story that tells men they must be partnered to be valuable is misleading. The message that endless male sacrifice is noble without balance is manipulative. The expectation that a man must provide endlessly while asking for nothing meaningful in return is unsustainable. So when men choose themselves, it is not because they dislike women. It is because they finally like themselves enough to stop accepting less than they give. They choose well-being over pleasing, growth over comfort, direction over obligation. That choice unsettles a system that depended on men ignoring their own needs. The real question is not why men are done. It is why it took so long. The imbalance did not appear overnight. It lingered for decades, held in place by shame, social pressure, and narratives that punished men for stepping away. The discomfort of leaving is small compared to the slow erosion of staying where you are unseen. The quiet of being single is light compared to the isolation of being with someone who does not truly recognize you. Modern men are not acting emotionally here. They're acting logically, weighing costs and benefits, assessing outcomes, concluding that the return no longer justifies the investment. This is not avoidance. This is analysis. This is clarity. This is informed decision-making grounded in psychology tips and hard-earned love advice. Attempts to frame this shift as insecurity miss the point entirely. It takes strength to resist conditioning, courage to question expectations, clarity to recognize when a deal no longer serves your life. Men are not retreating. They are redirecting, advancing toward purpose, structure, and internal stability. What we are witnessing is the first widespread rejection of an outdated social contract, one built on obligation rather than mutual gain. Now that men can build fulfilling lives alone, the old leverage is gone. Forced participation is over. What remains is choice, informed choice, and the message moving forward is simple and firm. Don't accept chaos dressed as connection. Be clear about what you offer and what you expect. Understand that peace is not negotiable. Remember this: choosing yourself does not close the door to love. It clears the path for a better version of it. One built on respect, balance, truth. So, what happens when men stop participating? When they stop providing on autopilot, stop sacrificing without appreciation, stop accepting blame for problems they didn't create, and stop seeking approval like permission slips to exist, the entire system built on male exhaustion begins to crack. And when it collapses, something unexpected happens. For the system, it's chaos. For individual men, it's liberation. You don't have to participate in your own destruction. That is the truth no one told you. You can simply walk away. And walking away is not quitting. Walking away is winning. The men who are done with women aren't bitter. They're free. Not angry, just aware. Not damaged, just finally whole. They've discovered something quietly revolutionary. They don't need what they were told they needed. For decades, the message was clear. Your value comes from being chosen. Your worth comes from being useful. Your happiness comes from keeping someone else satisfied. That message was wrong. The final red pill isn't about understanding women. It's about understanding yourself. Your value does not come from female validation. Your worth does not require relationship confirmation. Your happiness does not depend on someone else's moods, expectations, or approval. You are enough. Alone. As you are. That realization changes everything. This paradigm shift unsettles people who benefited from your insecurity. Because a man who knows himself cannot be easily controlled. Your integrity is not negotiable. Your time is not disposable. Your life is your own, not a resource for someone else's emotional comfort. So why are so many men stepping away from relationships with women? Because they've been paying attention. They've noticed that life feels lighter without constant tension, cheaper without endless demands, more peaceful without emotional chaos, and more fulfilling without persistent criticism disguised as help. Don't confuse distance with resentment. Be clear about this. They are not missing out. They are moving on. They are moving on to health, to purpose, to quiet mornings and focused evenings, to building something real. This isn't hatred. This is clarity. And clarity is powerful. These men are choosing meaning over noise, peace over performance, self-respect over approval. That choice doesn't make them lonely. It makes them grounded. If you're listening to this and something inside you nods, pay attention. That's not anger talking. That's awareness waking up. These are not complaints. They are psychology tips learned through experience. This is not rejection of love. It's hard-earned love advice about where fulfillment actually comes from. Be honest with yourself. Protect your energy. Build your life first. Because when a man stops begging for validation, he starts living with intention. And that, more than anything, is what real freedom looks like. Men, thanks for sticking with me until the end of this video. If you're watching this and quietly nodding along, know this, you're not alone. A lot of men have reached the same point. They realized that pushing harder doesn't always make things better. Sometimes, the smartest move is to stop, see the situation clearly, and protect yourself. Here's my honest advice to you. Don't let society pressure you into sacrificing your mental health, your values, or your self-respect just to prove you're a good man. Understanding these psychological dynamics is one of your greatest assets. When you understand them, you stop being manipulated. When you're aware, you take back control of your life. I genuinely want to hear from you. What was your breaking point? When did you realize it just wasn't worth it anymore? Leave your story in the comments. We're witnessing a major shift, and men walking away isn't the problem, it's the solution. If you want more deep analysis and honest conversations like this, make sure to subscribe to the Psychicaria channel. We're here to help you protect your mind and build a stronger, more grounded life. I'll see you in the next video. Stay sharp. Stay solid.